Hi everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps.
Today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful beaded wall hanging. Potomac Beads sent me these crystal cosmic rings and squares to try out, and this is the project I've decided to use them for. You'll also need a 10-inch brass ring, a dowel rod that is 36 inches long and about a half an inch in diameter, and some yarn. I'm using some Cascade 220 from my stash. The yarn needs to be cut into 2-yard lengths. I've started with about 50 lengths of yellow and ended up needing about 10 more, so you'll need about 60 2-yard lengths of the yellow. For the blue, I started with 1 skein and ended up using a whole second skein. So there's 220 yards in each skein, which means that you need a total of 220 2-yard lengths of yarn. Measure 1 length of yarn and then find something to wrap it around that's approximately the right size. If all else fails, you can put 2 chairs together the right distance apart and secure them with some books on the seat so that they don't move, and then you can wrap the yarn around the chairs and cut it off. I'm actually using a warping board for this, which is a tool used in weaving, and it's specifically designed to measure equal lengths of yarn. So I've gone ahead and measured a 2-yard length by wrapping it around the pegs of my warping board. I've also got these seed beads that Potomac Beads gave me to review. I have Matubo cut, which is kind of a hex cut in jet bronze. And then I have O beads, which are about half the thickness of normal seed beads. They're little donuts, basically, in purple iris. I'll be using the Matubo beads in the center of the circle, and I'll be using the O beads in the yellow strands that trail down from the circle. Now, if you're going to attach beads, you need to have a beading needle that can handle yarn. You can buy a commercial beading needle, or I like to use these. These are floss threaders that they're supposed to be for people with dental work so that you can thread the floss through the dental work, but they work really great at threading yarn through beads as well, and they're super cheap and you can buy them in these big packs. So I like to use these to attach the beads. Let's attach our first piece of yarn. Find the ends and hold them together, and then kind of just brush the yarn out until you find the center point. Now that forms a little loop. We're going to take that loop and put it under the edge of our hoop. Okay, stick our fingers through it and pull the ends out, just like that. And now this is attached. Snug it up. Okay, and it doesn't matter where you are right now. Now, when this is attached to the bottom, it's going to sit right about here. So this is about the farthest down I want to place any of my beads because, I don't want them off of the loop. What I'm going to do to get a nice scattered look with my beads is on each of these pairs of strings, I'm going to place 1 bead on the top on one string and 1 bead near the bottom on the other string. And I'll kind of be random about where within those ranges that I place them, and that way I'll get kind of an all-over scatter of beads. So I'm going to take my wonderful beading needle and place a bead on it, and then stick the yarn end through, okay? And then I can just slide the bead onto the yarn like that, and move it up to where I want it. So I want it right about there-ish on this one, right there. Sorry, that was off camera, right there. So I'm going to tie a little knot right about there. And that's just to hold the bead in place. And now that bead will settle onto the knot and be held there. So same thing with this one. Slide the bead on. Insert the yarn, okay, slide the bead over the needle and onto the yarn. And now this one I want down in the bottom half, so I'll put it right about there. That sounds good. And I just tie a knot right about there. And now that bead is in the bottom half, that bead is in the top half. Now let's attach the strings to the bottom. We're going to pull them over the end so that it's approximately straight across. Try to get as close as possible. And then I'm going to wrap the tails under the hoop and pull them out. All right? And then I'm just going to use them to tie a half knot right here. So bring it over, bring it through the circle, and then we're just going to zhuzh this knot into place so that we have some tension, but it's secure. There. And there we go. That's our first strand attached at both ends. And there's a bead here and a bead there. Now let's do that again. Grab another strand, find the ends, fold it to find the middle. Okay, slip this on. Now you can choose to either go to the left or to the right, but whatever you choose, you're going to do it every time. For me, I somehow find going to the left easier. If you find going to the right easier, like if you do it with opposite hands, that's fine too. So pull up the loop, okay? Insert your fingers through the loop and grab the yarn tails and pull them through. Tighten and let it rest right next to the other one. Now tie on some beads. And there we go. So now I'm going to take these two ends, and I came on the left, so I'm going to do the bottom on the right. So they cross over when you do that, okay? So pull that one out of the way, cross this over the edge, bring up the tails, use the tails to tie a knot. So now we're going to keep doing that, and we're going to keep doing everything exactly the same way, okay? Attach it at the top to the left, attach your beads where you want them, cross it over to the right, and even tie the knot on the same side, okay? Notice both my knots are coming off to the right. Tie the knot in exactly the same way every time. You want it exactly the same every time. Now, if you're good about managing your beads and it doesn't end up causing a mess for you or more of a problem, you can save a little bit of time by attaching two beads at once. So put on both beads and string it onto your yarn before you attach the yarn to the hoop at all, okay? So string on both of your beads. Now, when you find the center of the yarn, you're going to string one bead on one side and one bead on the other side. So I've got one bead closer to the end on this side and one closer to the end on that side. Okay, so there's my two beads. And now I find my ends, and then I find my middle, attach the yarn. Okay, now when I attach it, I have to leave this loop big so the beads can come through, and then tighten it. Okay, and now the beads are already on my two strands of yarn. I just have to scoot them up to where I want them and tie my knot. I finished adding all of my threads, and I ended up cutting 10 more threads just because I had extra beads I wanted to use up. So now there are 60 threads on this with 2 beads on them each. And I'm just gonna shift the threads over so they're nice and evenly spaced, and I like them. Now this technically is the back side. This is what I'm calling the back side because I like the way it looks at the front. Look at the knots here, and look at how they look here. I like this little line that you get on the top knots. I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. That little line that you get on the top knots from this side. And I like the way that the knots on this side look as well on the bottom. So I'm going to call this the front. That's not to say that you can't have the other side as the front. You just decide which side you like better. Now, I finished with the beads up here, but I have those other beads and I want to add those on the bottom. So here's all my bottom threads, and they come up to about here. What I'm going to do is just tie on some of these beads the same way that I tied them on the top. So I'll string a couple beads onto a thread,
or a bead onto a thread and then tie a knot underneath where I want the bead, and I'll keep it kind of random. We are going to be trimming the ends to make everything nice and even once we're all done. So probably leave about, oh, I don't know, 6 inches, something like this, where you don't put any beads because you might trim them off if you put them here. So let's just tie on one bead so you can see what I mean. And I have these little donut beads here. And I'm just going to grab a thread. Now I actually used up most of my supply of these beads on a crochet pattern for a ghost, so I don't have a whole bunch left, so I'm not going to have a whole lot of beads in this section. But I'll just put it where I want to put it and then tie a knot under where it is so that it stays there. There we go. And that's one bead attached. And I'm just going to go through this whole pile of beads that I've got here and attach them kind of all over so that there's a few little beads just dangling down from here. I finished adding all the beads, and I actually had enough to do 2 on several of the strands. So some of these strands have 1 bead on them and some have 2. Now we can put this piece aside and continue on to the blue piece. For the blue piece, we're simply going to attach the strands to the dowel bar. To start off with, we're not doing anything with beads yet, okay? So just undo your chain of strands, and if you want it to go faster, you can attach more strands at once. I'm going to attach 2 at a time because you don't want it to be too big of a clump. So I'm going to pull out 2 strands, find the center just like we did before, but this time with all 4 ends together. There we go. Find the center and attach it to our dowel rod. And you can see that that 2 strands creates a larger bundle than what we've been working with on the hoop. So we don't want to do too many of strands together. 2 strands is enough. So we're just going to attach all of these strands that I have 2 at a time, evenly spaced across the dowel bar. And we want to make sure that we're putting them all on the same way. So if I'm doing it this way from underneath and then grabbing it just like I did with the hoop, I want to do all of them the same way. So then when we decide which way is our right side, they'll all be facing the same way. And it's probably going to be like this. Okay, and you want to save just 2 strands of the blue to tie the ring onto the dowel rod. I've attached all my threads and I flipped it over so that I'm on the right side. And again, you can look at the way the knots are and see which side you like better and make that the right side. So this is my right side. Now, this is going to be hard to show on the camera. You won't see the whole thing. But I've kind of combed through everything to get nice straight lines here. And I've got this curtain of yarn. I did end up using a whole second skein. So this is 2 skeins of yarn in the 2-yard threads, 2-yard pieces attached by knots at the top, 2 at a time. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some of these rings.
Remember that in the end, the yellow portion is going to be sitting on top of the blue portion in the middle. So we don't want to tie on any of the rings in this center portion where the yellow strands are going to be. So let's put that roughly in place, and then we'll tie on some of these rings on either side of it.
I'm going to attach this one. Let's put it up here. So again, I'm going to tie a knot where I want it. And I want it kind of high, so I'm going to put it right there. So I've tied my knot. Now I'm going to thread this through from front to back. Just like that. Let it sit backwards and go ahead and tie this knot behind it. Kind of loose, don't choke up too much. There we go, and when that's hanging, it'll just hang like that. I finished adding all the sparkles, and now it's time to attach the ring, the yellow ring, to the center of our dowel rod. So the first thing to do is find the exact center, and I've done that. I counted the number of bundles on each side, same number of bundles on each side. This is the center bundle. Then I'm going to move over the same number of bundles on each side until I get the width of the actual ring. So in this case, that width is about here, okay? Right about there. So I need to move over enough bundles to fill that much space. So let's start with 10 bundles on each side. One, and I don't think that's going to be enough. Let's do another 5 on each side. So that is 15 bundles on each side of the center. Let's see how that fits around the ring. That is almost perfect. I'm going to get rid of 1 bundle. So for my ring, I'm doing 14 bundles on each side of the center, and that's where I'm going to tie it on. So I've got the center bundle plus 14 on each side. So now I had set aside 2 of the blue threads to tie on with. So I'm going to take one of those. Okay, I've positioned my bar and I'm ready to attach it. Now I'm going to leave a bit of a tail that I'm going to end up weaving in under these loops later. And it's a little fiddly at first until you get that tail locked in. So that's our first goal. But we're going to go up and around the bar, okay? Then diagonally across the ring, and then up and around the bar. And don't try to pull it tight yet because the tail will just come right out. So down under the bar and then up and around it, okay? So that's our first X-shaped stitch. Now we're going to keep doing that stitch. So over diagonally, up and around. Over diagonally, and then up and around. And by now, sorry I hit the camera there, by now this should be pretty secure. So now we're just going to keep winding until we've had enough or until we run out of this thread that we've got, this 2-yard piece of yarn. Now after a few crosses, I'm actually going to change position. Instead of going up and under the bar, I'm going to come up and under the ring. Okay, and then I start crossing in the other direction. So I cross over this way and go down and under the bar. Cross over this way, down and under the bar. I actually find that easier. So if one direction is easier for you, feel free to do that one. Okay, that's the full piece of yarn. I've used all of it. Now I'm going to secure these ends. This one, since it hasn't been wrapped over and over, I'm actually going to sew it through this wrapping here. It's very tight, so just find a spot where it can go in just to secure it under the wraps there. So it's nice and tight. And then I'll weave it in under these, just go under several and bring it out here. Later when I'm all done, not right now, but later when I'm all done, I'll trim off whatever little tail is remaining. And this one, same thing. I'm going to weave it under these. And later when I'm all done and I've got everything steamed and trimmed and all that, then I'll trim off these tails. If there's anything poking out, I'll just trim it off. So that is one that's been attached. And now we've got to do the same thing on the other side. Now, if you're worried about this not being secure enough, you can add a dab of hot glue to the back side or right here where it's joined if you want to. You can actually glue it before you finish wrapping it, and then the wrapping will cover any glue that you've put on there. But it's not necessary. It will hold just fine, or it should hold just fine with just the yarn. Now all that's really left to do is to trim off the bottom of this piece because it's very uneven right now. But before I do that, I want to steam it so that all of these crinkly pieces of yarn will relax, and I'm going to comb through it with my fingers, make sure everything's laying nice and flat and smooth, tighten up any of these knots on the top to make sure everything's all nice and even so that when I trim it, there's not any straggling loose threads that end up becoming longer later. So I'm going to do that, and then And I'm going to steam it probably in the bathroom, not against a wall, because you don't want to steam the wall, right? And remember that this is wool yarn, so you want to steam it very gently, steam it from far away. You just want to give it enough steam to relax it, not enough to felt it. So be very gentle with it. And once it's all steamed, we will trim it and it'll be ready to hang. Once it's fully dry and everything's nice and straight, you can go ahead and trim it. Now I'm going to try to do this with it hanging right here and just do it while it's hanging. You can also lay it down on a flat surface and use a rotary cutter and a ruler to get it perfectly even. But I'm going to see how well I do just like this. And if needed, I will come in and fix it. And that's it, the wall hanging is done. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.